You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
So I've got a question for you. How would it feel to know that you're delivering top-quality lessons, small groups, and individual activities to your kiddos, but that you're not having to sacrifice your nights and weekends planning? That'd be pretty great, right? That's why I created Impact, my monthly membership program for school counselors, where I intentionally select resources designed to support you and your students. Each month, I give you monthly curriculum plans outlining which activities to do and how to do them, along with the activities themselves. So I'm talking Tier 1, 2, and 3 resources and data tracking tools. You'll also receive video implementation guides where I walk you through page by page of every resource so you feel confident to implement it with your kiddos. You can attend quarterly live training sessions where you can earn PD credit, get in the hot seat during one of our twice monthly Zoom calls to get feedback on your specific caseload needs, or just hang out in the members-only Facebook group and connect with other counselors who are just like you so you don't have to feel like you're on your own island anymore. And I'm always sprinkling in fun bonuses and challenges to keep it exciting. So if this sounds like the exact thing you need to take the guesswork out of planning and make the maximum impact at your school, head over to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/impact to get started today. Okay, let's go to the show. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So today, let's go back to the basics. Let's talk about why 3-tiered MTSS. And what is MTSS and what are we supposed to be doing with it? So MTSS is multi-tiered system of supports. So this is talking about and referring to that pyramid or triangle image that you may be seeing everywhere. Now, if you were a veteran school counselor, this may be super easy and you know it like the back of your hand, but hang out with me here because I do have a few things that I think you may find valuable. And if you are a new school counselor, listen up because this is what your entire program is going to be based on, right? This and the Ask a National model, which I'll be talking about next week, is what you really want the foundations of your comprehensive counseling program to be focused on. So let's talk about MTSS. I had an episode on this very early on in the podcast, but I want to revisit it because it is the beginning of the school year, and I just want to make sure that you're clear on what it is and how you can use it. So like I said, it stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports. It used to be referred to as RTI, or Response to Intervention. And like when I was in grad school, just a little story time here, I remember one of my teachers. Well, so all the professors had previously been in the field or somehow in that counseling field, but one of my professors was an actual school counselor. Like by day, she was a school counselor, and then by night, she taught our class. And I actually ended up interning for her. Lovely lady. But anyways, I remember she was like boots on the ground in the school, and she was always talking about RTI and showing us the pyramid. But for some reason in my head, it just seemed so abstract. I couldn't think about it in a school setting and how this was actually happening, how she was actually implementing it. It just seemed so abstract to me. And I remember even honestly, to be honest, in my interview for the job that I ended up getting, I mentioned it as like a buzzword, as like a, I know what I'm talking about phrase, hire me. I was like, oh, and I plan to do RTI and 3 levels of intervention. And, but I didn't really know what I was doing or talking about until I was in the classroom, in the small groups and in the individual sessions. And I was like, oh, it clicked. These are the 3 levels everyone's talking about. It's not some just crazy image. Like it's very practical knowledge that we can implement here. So I hope to share this with you so you can feel that it's practical and attainable and that you can have a takeaway today that you can use with your kiddos. So I want to read a little bit. I was researching about this further, and I was on the Ask a website, and I want to read to you what they said here. And it says, MTSS is a culturally sustaining, evidence-based framework implemented in pre-K to 12 schools using data-based problem solving to integrate academic and behavioral instruction and intervention at tiered intensities to improve the learning and social-emotional functioning of all students. So that's a mouthful, and I'm going to link to the entire article so you can read everything about MTSS. But basically, I just wanted to define it for you there on how what it is it's a tiered approach to improve the learning and social emotional functioning of all students, right? And we're doing that through academic and behavioral instruction. And of course, it's evidence-based, data-based, all that good stuff. But then it goes on to say, school counselors align their school counseling program with MTSS by providing direct and indirect student services, including Tier 1 interventions in the form of classroom instruction and school-wide programming and initiatives. So I'm going to read these step by step, and then we'll break them down. Tier 2 interventions, including small group and individual counseling, consultation and collaboration with school personnel, families, and community stakeholders. And Tier 3, indirect student support services through consultation, collaboration, and facilitation of referrals. So again, I just read all of that from the ASCA website because it says, what is the school counselor's role as it pertains to MTSS? Because you want to remember that MTSS is school-wide, so we're talking teachers are using this for academic interventions, such as, maybe a reading small group or something. Or behavior specialists are using this, or special ed teachers are using this to provide those students with more intensive behavior supports as well. So it's not just for school counselors. It's school-wide, but then more specifically, the part I just read is showing you how school counselors can align their program with it through direct and indirect services across the 3 tiers. So let's break these down further. The first one says, Tier 1 interventions in the form of class instruction and school-wide programming and initiatives. So I feel like I'm beating the dead horse on class instruction. I'm always telling you guys, Tier 1, you got to do your class lessons, get your teachers to sign up, go in the classes, at least monthly, or if you're in the specials rotation as they schedule you, and you want to do those Tier 1 preventative class lessons to reach all students, right? We know this. We're doing this. But the second part I really want to touch on is the school-wide programming and initiatives. So don't forget about these school-wide things you can be doing. So I wanted to give you an example of a few, and these can be fun things. But for example, something I always like to do through character education is like a fun run, or so get out at recess and pick your cause. So I did one once for bullying prevention. We had a bullying prevention fun run where the kids signed a pledge, and then they pledged laps, and we had bracelets that were bullying prevention and stickers and prizes. We had music. You can make it totally fun, but that's different than a class lesson on bullying prevention, right? This is a school-wide initiative, maybe something you're doing out at recess or in the cafeteria. You can do big character challenges at your school. You can do student ambassadors. I love to do 5th grade student ambassadors where they're leaders at the school, and maybe they're helping plan these activities. You can do peers, buddies. You can have a 5th grade student pair up with a kindergarten student to help read them stories, or any of these school-wide initiatives that you can do. You can have everyone on board for some type of fundraiser for the community, or you can do a career fair. So I think a lot of times we get bogged down in the class lessons as the Tier 1 intervention, and we forget that there's a lot of opportunity for fun school-wide initiatives and character ed things. Another one I did during a drug prevention week is we did a flash mob, and all the kids came out and we danced. I've done photo booths, so a summer fun photo booth, but where you paid $1 and then we donated that money to something. So I don't want you to think of this as adding another thing to your plate, because you may be thinking, I'm barely keeping my head above water with the class lessons. I can't imagine doing school-wide things. But try to just sprinkle in one quarterly, maybe get with a character education team or a school climate team, and see if you can plan something fun that's also going to teach this character education or preventative school counseling, social emotional skill. Okay. Now, Tier 2, it said the interventions include small group and individual counseling. Rewind, and individual counseling. Okay, so I almost spit on my coffee reading this because I'm always saying Tier 2 small group, Tier 3 individual counseling. But I do see what they did here, and it was brought to my attention that they're including individual with the Tier 2, and then for Tier 3, they're talking mainly referral. So I do my Tier 2 as small group, and then my Tier 3 is individual/referral. So whatever model you want to go by, but that definitely caught my attention. But the piece I want to say here, really focus on, is consultation and collaboration with school personnel, families, and community stakeholders. So in addition to doing our small groups and our individual sessions, we know these are our things. Okay, we got to do small groups, got to do individuals. But how much consultation and collaboration with school personnel, families, and community stakeholders are you doing? It's something to consider, and it's vital as well. So you want to think about, you're likely already doing this. Again, I'm not trying to add other things to your plate. I'm just trying to bring attention as you're thinking about MTSS and how it relates to your program, that you're touching on all of these aspects of it. So you're likely already collaborating with families and school personnel. So you're probably meeting with teachers and meeting with parents to discuss the students' goals as they pertain to counseling. Or you're probably talking with them about referrals and why you're meeting with these students. So that's something that's super important as well. And it says community stakeholders. So don't underestimate the power of your local community. I mentioned earlier a community fair, but get in touch with those community resources and see, a lot of times there's small businesses in the community, or nonprofits, or Girl Scouts, or firefighters, or different organizations and groups in the community who want to help the school system and they don't know how. So you can reach out to them and see if they can collaborate with you to somehow support or donate or work with your small groups and individuals as well. So that's another way to think about our Tier 2 interventions. So basically, as I was reading about this morning, I was just seeing like, wow, there's so much more than just the class lesson and the small group and the individual session. We can really make this way more comprehensive and school-wide and community-wide. So that's why I kind of, in my notes here, I bolded those parts of their statements, because I just found it really powerful and was reflecting on my own programs and just thinking about how I could expand to reach more students than ever before, you know? And then for Tier 3, so like I said, I was always saying Tier 3 is individual, which is how I run my program, but this is saying Tier 3 is all indirect student support versus direct. So it says Tier 3 indirect student support services through consultation, collaboration, and facilitation of referrals. So like I'm always telling you guys, once we collect data, and one of the reasons we want to collect data is to make sure that we're supporting students and getting them the help that they need. So if we're unable to do that in the school setting, that is okay, but we need to help facilitate a referral. We never want to meet with a parent and say, oh, yeah, I don't think we're going to be able to help them. It's a little too intense for what we can provide. See ya. No, we definitely don't want to do that. We want to help collaborate and facilitate that referral, and that's where that Tier 3 piece is. So I want you to think about this in 6 parts. So you have our 3 parts we always talk about: our class lessons, our small groups, and our individual sessions. But then there's these 3 extra parts you can do to provide even more support and reach more students. So one way is through the school-wide programming and initiatives like we mentioned at the Tier 1 level. Then we have the collaboration and meeting with school personnel, families, and community stakeholders. And then lastly, the facilitation of referrals. So it's class lessons, small groups, individual sessions, school-wide initiatives, collaborating with families and teachers, and facilitating referrals. Those are, if you want to think of it in like 6 different areas, those are 6 ways that you can make sure that we're supporting the whole child across all 3 tiers. Now, a few other things I want to know, like what does this actually look like? What are you actually doing? So in addition to those 3 tiers that we've mentioned, it's also important to advocate for equitable education. So they recently updated the standards, the student standards, ASCA did, and they've made a lot of changes that were totally necessary. And one thing that they touch on and that we want to make sure we're doing is that we're advocating for equitable education for all students and working to remove systemic barriers. So that's something we want to be mindful of, conscious of, and actively doing every day throughout our program. So of course this doesn't look like a checklist. You're not like, oh, advocated for equitable education, check. Work to remove systemic barriers, check. It doesn't really work that way, right? This is an ongoing project, an ongoing something we're trying to learn and improve on every day throughout our program. So I want you to be mindful of that as well. Another thing, and this was brought to my attention at the ASCA conference. I wish I could recall the name of the presenter, but she was talking about using data and how you can use data in your program. And she was super proactive about it. And she was saying that she would look at academic and behavioral referrals and academic attendance data, things like that, and then determine what intervention she would do. So it was a really cool, proactive approach. So she would take like some behavior data. Oh, we have students who are, getting referred for this. And then she would specifically say, I'm going to have a small group to address this behavior, and then we'll track data, and then we'll see if it helped or not. It's like, whoa, it was so concrete. I really loved it. Also, she was saying for attendance, like, oh, we have this group of students or this population isn't attending. They're having really low attendance. So let's start seeing them in a group, and then we'll track the data after we do these interventions, and then we'll see, did their attendance improve? So I just thought that was really cool as well. That's something we can do is, as I mentioned earlier with MTSS, in the definition there, it says it's database problem solving to integrate academic and behavioral instruction. So we're always looking at that social emotional piece, and we're looking at our referrals and aligning our small groups and individual sessions that way. But don't forget, you can look at your school's database. You can access your, if you're using like Power School or whatever database you have, access it. Check out the attendance data. Check out the academic and behavioral data and referrals. And then you can create your small groups around that, or you can see students individually around that. And I guarantee that, like it or not, your principal is going to like, someone called these the sexy numbers, right? The attendance data, the referral data, the behavior data, and academics. So these are the numbers that the parents want to see. Like, oh, we have all of our schools high achieving in this area, right? These are like the braggy numbers. So I guarantee if you start to do some small groups and individual sessions based on these things, you're going to get a lot of positive attention, which in turn will help advocate for the profession. So again, as we're doing MTSS, let's get back to basics here. We're doing our interventions through small groups, through individual sessions, and those class-wide lessons. We're also doing school-wide things. We're collaborating with teachers and parents, and we're facilitating referrals as needed. And then day to day, as we determine how we're going to see students, we're not going to only look at referrals, but we can look at that bigger scope picture, and we can see how we can support them through the academic and behavior needs as well. In addition to being mindful daily of making sure that we're making education equitable for all of our students and working hard to remove those systemic barriers. So I wanted to share my thoughts with you guys here. I hope I wasn't rambling too much, and I hope this is clear and concise and easy to understand, because the goal of this podcast is to give you something actionable to take into your school day, especially if you're listening on your commute. But as I was, reading about MTSS, there were these parts that stood out to me that I wanted to bold and share with you guys to make sure that we're not limiting it to just small groups, class lessons, and individual sessions, but that we're looking at our program as a whole and how we can support all of our kiddos. So I hope you found this helpful. I have a sample curriculum map for you. I was talking about it last week as well. Go ahead and download the freebie. I'll link to it in the show notes. But this is something you can use to help you plan if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're like, yikes, this is a lot. You're talking about these other areas, but I don't even know what class lesson I'm going to do on Monday. I've got you covered. So get that sample curriculum map. It's a freebie. I'll link to it in the show notes, and I'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.